Monster Hunter Wilds, whenever it releases in 2025, is going to come out to a very large audience awaiting it. And that means it also has a lot of expectations on its shoulders. And with the dedicated fan base that Monster Hunter has, there is already so much speculation, hype, and expectations placed on the game, even from just the tiniest teaser. And it's in a very interesting situation that's going to be tough to navigate. But I want to talk about the franchise and what we can realistically expect from it moving forward, kind of with the idea of staying hopeful, but tempering expectations. I always hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And as the whole cycle for the game begins, I think it's best to approach it from a certain view, or at least with enough information for things to not get too out of control. There's a lot of things I'm going to cover today. And hi, I'm Mug Thief, a person who plays too many games and thinks too much about them. Let's get into it. Monster Hunter Wilds exists at a very interesting, precise cross-section of things. The first and most important thing is that being the sequel to World means more than you think. Monster Hunter with World went from being a very beloved, very popular franchise in Japan with a fan base out of Japan to a full-on international success. It now has a huge fan base, and with 21 million sales and growing, being Capcom's biggest game, there's now a whole new audience and a whole new generation of players with different expectations on it. And it's also coming at a very interesting time, technologically speaking. I have already talked at length, and will continue to do so in more detail in the future, about development times and costs and budgets and just how long it takes to make things. But with those new development cycles, Capcom has really shown to be one of the best developers there is. Their RE engine continues to produce some of the best visuals, and some of the best games are put on it. Surprisingly enough, for a Japanese company, their games tend to be some of the best out-of-the-box experiences when it comes to PC gaming. And of course, that means we're expecting top-notch quality from whatever Wilds does. And this leads to all of these different expectations from various generations of gamers wanting different things from the game. Be it what systems and mechanics carry over or don't, the monster roster and how many are returning or the new ones, and the same for weapons when it comes to the returning weapons and potential new ones. There's just a lot of speculation and a lot of different wish lists out there. But Capcom, and specifically the Monster Hunter team, have to face all of this when it comes to releasing Wilds. And I'm sure that not everybody is going to be happy. But there are some very big things that we need to talk about with Wilds and how those expectations might shake out. And I do want to ground all of them in reality. So let's start off with the quality of Wilds at launch, because this is a really big one. Today, when we look at Monster Hunter World, we see a really big, complete game with a ton of content that we all love. But back when it launched, not only did it have a lot of the gatekeeping that we see, a lot of people disliking the direction of the series, the simplification of certain systems, and just not liking a lot of stuff that just always happens, but we also saw a game that was not very full. Now, it didn't have the worst launch monster roster with 36 or 37, although there are some subspecies in there. The worst ever goes to Monster Hunter Tri, which featured 17 or 18 monsters, but it was a significant drop in the amount of monsters available at launch. And more importantly, even though the number of 36 or 37 might seem high, a lot of the monsters were very similar, especially where it matters most, being endgame. Since really, a lot of those starting monsters, and this is a separate problem that the series needs to address, those early monsters don't really matter once you reach the end game. Once you get closer to the end and you are repeating hunts and farming a lot of stuff, you're going to be hunting the same 4 or 5 monsters over and over again. And a lot of those were kind of just dragons, just flying dragons, either elder dragons or Nergigante/Xeno'jiiva. And that really hurt a lot of Monster Hunter World's feeling as a full game. And it's very apt to compare it to Tri, because that was also a big shift into new skeletons and new everything, because it was another generational shift onto console hardware. Now with Iceborne, the number went up to 71, so there is some good news here. Obviously the team started to get a hang of things and in a small amount of time managed to produce a lot of really good monsters, which does bode very well for what Wilds might do. But at the same time, the track record on both Monster Hunter World and Rise is not only that they were lacking content at launch, but even in the case of Rise, and yes, Rise is a different team, but company standards and ways of operating are kind of shared. It wasn't even finished. Like, the story wasn't done. You didn't even have the final quest to close the story. They just decided to patch that in. And that's gonna be the norm. These are now live service games. Both World and Rise benefited heavily from a ton of different updates, adding all sorts of things. And I think in both cases, receiving completely new systems through updates, not even expansions. Not to mention monsters in general. But we don't know how much costs have been incremented because we don't know what the new systems might be or how they affect monsters or a lot of things. So I'd rather base myself on track record when setting my expectations. Because while yes, you can definitely say, well, they're coming from World, they already have a lot of experience, we assume that they're not going to be very different from the World rigs that they are using, so we can expect quite a lot of monsters at launch. Maybe that's not the case, because both Rise and World kind of suffered from a lack of content and being unfinished. So we can hope that's not the case, but it's happened the last 2 times. So I would be careful as to what this game will be when it launches. And I'm sure that I, along with many other people, will buy the game at launch and will love a lot of what it has to offer regardless. And we will happily wait for updates that finish it, if you want to call it that. But I also think there's a lot of people jumping into the very updated World or the now final Iceborne version of World and seeing all of the different stuff there is to do, so much progression, so many monsters. And while I'd love for the game to be quite rich at launch, even if it doesn't have the G rank, you know, the expansion ranks, because it won't, because that'll be the expansion, I would tread with caution. But you know what doesn't lack content? Today's sponsor, which helps keep this channel running. And today's sponsor is one that we've all heard of before, but I hadn't played until now, and that's Raid Shadow Legends. And for those of you who don't know, Raid is a free-to-play fantasy hero collecting RPG that you can play on mobile or on PC, featuring PvP, raids, plenty of endgame, just a lot of content. And if you want to join in right now, you can use the QR code or the link in the description to start playing. Now, as I said, I had never played Raid before this, and I've played a lot of gacha games, so I can confidently say that it has a great new player experience. It introduces everything at a great pace, opening up slowly to all of the different things that you can do in the game. There's a ton of content, a ton of options and customization, but a lot of quality of life features as well. Like, when you get a new champion, you can check the reviews from the community telling you if it's a good champion or not for you to invest in, and it's broken down on what type of content they think they're best for. And for min-maxers like me, that's a godsend. And it's always getting updated with things like the new Cursed City update, which is a 100-stage progression. So if you're like me and you're worried that you're going to invest a lot of time into a game and there's not going to be enough content or enough new updates, you really don't need to worry about that with Raid. And if you download now using the QR code or the link in the description below, you're going to get access to 2 epic heroes, Lightsworn, and once you reach level 15, Juliana. And if you want to join a community, you can join Mug's Thieves, my clan, which you can find just by searching up Mug Thief in the game, so that everybody can work towards their goals together and discover everything that Raid has to offer, which is a lot. So once again, thank you to Raid for sponsoring this video and supporting this channel, and remember, you have the links in the description and the QR code to download the game today. The next thing is the systems, and this is where I have seen the most repeated idea over and over again. And that is that it's going open world. Now, I'm not saying that it's not going open world, but I am saying that's ambitious to think. We do have confirmed new systems like whatever's going on with the weather or how much more wildlife there is at any given time, and of course the mount. We don't know anything about combat, and we definitely don't know anything about open world. These could just be very big areas, much bigger than what we've seen before, but open world would be a significant change to a lot of the systems in the game. That would be the biggest departure the franchise has ever had, even if once you're out in the open world, it actually makes a lot of sense. And I love the idea of just leaving town and going around, having the freedom to hunt things at my own will, and how that will impact pacing and farming and tracking monsters and all sorts of things. I'm totally into it. But the idea of prepping for a quest, eating food, and then going out hunting has been very integral to Monster Hunter forever. And while some people point to the Guiding Lands from Iceborne as the prototype for the open world, the Guiding Lands wasn't very good. Just saying, in my opinion. It does pose a more important technical question that I'm not sure if anybody can answer. If you can, please leave it in the comments, I'd love to know. What about multiplayer? As far as I'm aware, we're not sure how multiplayer works in these games and how it's going to interact with the RE engine or how it's coded and things like that to really facilitate a whole open world and multiplayer parties. So if it is open world, are multiplayer parties going to be locked into an area around the leader with invisible barriers? Is it just not going to be truly open world and multiplayer, but yes, in single player? Because multiplayer is a really, really big part of Monster Hunter. And that's just a big technical part. Beyond that, there's the obvious design things that I was saying, like how do towns work? Are we going to have a lot of different towns that we can stop at to eat and prep for hunts and then we just go out there? Is it all going to be one central town? Is it still going to be menu-based where we're fast traveling to town after we hunt down every monster and then the open world is there, but it's not really the most integrated? There's a lot of shifts that need to happen for the open world to exist and to be good. Is that what I want the series to do? Yes. Do I think it will happen? I don't know, but I know that if it does, there's also a lot of chances for it to be bad. And even if it isn't bad, to still be controversial within the fan bases. It's very hard to nail an open world out of the gate, and more when you're transitioning a series that has so many systems and so many people that are resistant to change and love the series, and move that entire thing into an open world structure. So I'm not sure if Capcom, and I guess nobody is looking in that direction. But I wouldn't just blindly bet on that being the case. And I wouldn't be surprised, and this is one of those moments where I say you can quote me on this, I wouldn't be surprised if Capcom is relatively coy about how open the world is or not as we start getting the first trailers, and it'll take a while for them to really say if it's fully open world or if it's not, or if it's a hybrid. Clip it, I guess. The next big thing that people talk about are weapons. Of course, weapons are at the core of Monster Hunter, and as much as Monster Hunter World innovated in how the monsters are, how they interact, the graphical fidelity, and the whole ecosystem and atmosphere of everything, most of what you do in Monster Hunter is hunt monsters. And that normally means whacking them over the head with stuff. And the weapons that you do it with are very important. Now, it's been a while since we've had this set of 14 weapons. And the only signs of new weapons we've seen have been in Monster Hunter Frontier, the MMO, which introduced, if I'm not mistaken, 2 weapons. So Monster Hunter Frontier is missing the Charge Blade, from what I can tell from the wiki, but it does have the Tonfa and the Magnet Spike, both of which are pretty damn cool, and a lot of people in the fanbase have wanted those to come into the mainline series for a while. Will that happen? No clue. Would it be cool? Yes. Is it the most important thing? I'm not sure about that. Now, I have a full 30-minute video talking about Monster Hunter Rise and why the Generations and Rise side of development, the portable games, are so much more important to the franchise than the iterative innovations that Monster Hunter World brings. And that's because they fundamentally change how combat works in a very smart way by giving hunters customization of their weapons beyond the weapon they carry. It's about their moveset. While new weapons would be cool, I do think that combat needs a bigger refresh, especially for the people who have played Generations and Rise. Moving back to just standard movesets with no customization is never going to feel as good. There are a very large list of benefits to the Hunter arts and the switch skills, which are kind of the same thing that we see in those 2 games. And if you want more info on that, full video is up here somewhere on the card or on my channel. And people continue to say the portable games and the mainline games share nothing in common, which is not true. They definitely do take elements from each other as time evolves, because there are just objectively correct changes that are made, like no more loading screens between areas, for example. And while World was already in development when the Hunter Arts of Generations existed, it's now been a long time, and I hope that the influence of Hunter Arts and the development that happened of them into Switch skills during Rise at least leads to a similar system in Wilds that allows for the weapons to be that much more deep and a lot more expressive in how you want to play, because like I said, there's a long list of reasons that this direction, even if its implementation at the moment in those two games is not to your liking, the direction of giving these 14 weapons that we know more to do is a really good one. Much more so than just adding 2 new weapons. But if they added 2 new weapons, that'd be pretty great. Despite all of this, in the worst case, we're still going to get a little bit more complexity, some extra moves added to each weapon. That's always exciting, but I do really think that not following the Switch skills branch of development would be a mistake that's gonna feel really bad for people that have been playing Generations and Rise. And this has nothing to do with World being better than Rise or anything. This is just a universal mechanic that improves combat. And something like the Switch skills can definitely be implemented in a slower paced game like World. They don't go together. The speed of the game and the design of its combat mechanics don't need to be tied together. So I would love that. If it doesn't happen, I'll still love the game probably, but I will be disappointed, and I think a lot of people would be missing out on what I think is the natural evolution of the combat in the series. So for my fellow Rise breakers out there, yeah, I guess we do have to be mentally prepared for the idea that we might go back to a simpler fighting system, and that sucks, but another thing to temper our expectations around. Having said all of this, I am tremendously excited for Monster Hunter Wilds, as it shows that so many people are, and so many people returning to World, or joining in for the first time, or returning to Rise or Sunbreak. People are on the Monster Hunter train again, because it's a very special franchise that just sucks you in and doesn't let go, and there's really nothing like it. And I think that most of the people who watch this video are going to be like me, and we're going to love this game probably no matter what. But that doesn't mean it's going to be perfect out of the gate, or make all of the decisions that we would want, or so many other things. And I think it's good to slowly approach it, knowing the track record of the last games have not been that feature complete at launch. We've been flip-flopping for 3 games between more complex combat, simplified combat, more emphasis on one thing or another. I hope that the gimmick in this game is just the mount, the wildlife, and the weather, and that we're not going to be surprised with like, and a grappling hook, and also you have to use it in combat, like the clutch claw coming up. But there's so many things that can still happen with the game that while we love it and it's cool to talk about it, from a personal perspective, I do think the best thing you can do is to stop and realize that we're gonna love it probably no matter what. The direction that they go in, who knows? They have a lot on their plate to contend with. As I said at the beginning of the video, whole new audience, whole new generation of audience as well, and a big technological leap forward for a company that right now has set some pretty high standards for themselves. And what can come from that atmosphere and how the development team is working, who knows? This might be a completely different Monster Hunter. It might be open world, do something completely unexpected with the combat. And many people will love it and embrace it, and many people will hate it. It might be just an incremental evolution of World, and it might not bring any combat innovations like switch skills, and it just might have bigger areas and a mount, and people will be disappointed that it doesn't push things further. At the end, nobody will really be happy because no full wish list can be fulfilled. They kind of cancel each other out in many ways. So it doesn't matter on what side of the argument you are. I think we should just hope for a really good monster hunting experience and not concern ourselves so much with the new weapons or the open world or the combat systems. Because that's what history has taught us, that we should expect small incremental upgrades that sometimes fall flat when they launch and are polished up before by expansions and now polished up by patches and then expansions. And I know it's not fun to think about it that way, but remember, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and maybe don't pre-order. Capcom, along with things like Larian and From Software, are on my list of I will pre-order this because I'm confident in it. And now that I'm a content creator even more, because sometimes I want to make content on it as soon as possible. But really, maybe the game launches and early reviews or whatever come out saying, and while all of this is great, there's really like only 40 monsters and like 12 of them are reskins. So maybe no. And just keep that in mind. I know that it's not a popular thing to say. There's probably going to be a lot of people telling me I'm an idiot in the comments, but I think that this is the best thing I can say right now within the fandom. And if you agree with it and you made it all the way to the end of the video, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and especially leave a comment with some positive stuff. Most of my Monster Hunter videos receive a lot of likes and they do have positive comments, but I get an overwhelming amount of negative stuff down there. So, and I'd love to have a very loving community, a very positive one down there. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Mug Thief, and hope you have a great day. I'll see you very soon.